Today we are doing a review session for our final exam. We're going to cover the chapters. We're going to talk a little bit about the chapters that are going to be covered on the final exam and come up with a problem set that you can do to prepare for the final, and then just talk about the specifics, the due dates and the time limits and all that kind of stuff, the logistical stuff. So having said that, let's get started by going over to the document camera. And the first thing is our midterm exam covered chapters 1 through 4, and our final exam is going to cover chapter 5, 6, and 11 out of the textbook, plus 16 out of the handbook. And so this is a list of the homework problems that came out of each one of those chapters. But let's just do like a really quick, a minute or two review of what the content of each of those chapters is, more or less. Now, chapter 5 is shear and bending moment diagrams. And so you can be assured that there will be a shear bending moment diagram on the exam. Now, I gave you a couple of different methods to work those. One of them was purely graphical, and one was based on the equations of shear moment compared to load. Okay, but in either case, the process is to do a load diagram, to find your external forces, do a free body diagram, and then stack the three diagrams, free body diagram, shear diagram, and moment diagram, one on top of the other. And this is actually your answer with units and so forth. Now, for our shear bending moment diagrams, I am not going to have any non-constant forces. So in other words, we will have point loads, and we will have W equals constant. So we won't have any functional W's. In other words, we would not have something where a W looked like this. The only kind of a W, in other words, a load per foot we would have would be something that was constant, where we just had a constant load per foot. Okay? So point loads, which of course is, here's my reactions, and then constant W. So we'll limit ourselves to those two ideas. Now, if we take a look at the problems in chapter 5, the most difficult sort of a problem I would use as an example, and I actually kind of like this problem, is 5.10. Okay? Problem 10 out of chapter 5. Yes?
We had a question when he was going over it last night.
Yes, absolutely.
We always focused on your having your isolated point and then your moving point on the ends of it.
Yes.
He decided to grab a problem where you had it actually in the middle.
In the middle.
Hanging parts.
Right.
We were wondering.
How's that work?
Yeah.
What's up with that? Right.
Yeah.
Right. The answer is the analysis turns out to be exactly the same. Okay. You do the free body diagram and you get the reactive loads on the supports wherever they're positioned. And then when you do your cutaways, what you can see is if you have an overhang edge like this, let's see, here's your beam and you have a fixed support and a rolling support. Okay, if you have no reactive force in this part, right? So unless you have an applied load, like say W right here, if you don't have something like this, the reactive load here is actually, there's not going to be anything going on until you get to the support. So you have to have an applied load in order to get a V or an M at the end. So if you had something like this, for example, where you had a distributed load here to the end, your shear would look something like this. and then it would go to 0 here, right, at the support or whatever the reaction is here. And that would be all that you would have going on. In other words, this portion of the beam without an applied load is not in shear at all.
So you don't focus on gravity off that support?
Well, you don't focus on gravity. Now later on, when you take a mechanics of materials, you will have to take the weight distribution of the structural member into account.
Okay.
Absolutely. But in this class, we've sort of just pretended like everything's really lightweight or something. I don't know.
It just doesn't happen unless there's a force.
That's exactly correct. But in real life, that's a very good point. You would have to find the center of gravity of the beam, or whatever the structural member is, and apply the weight per foot from the beam itself, is what it amounts to. Okay? But it's a good, great question, actually. Great question. So, did I answer that adequately?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, in this class, and it's really good that you guys are thinking ahead, because those are the questions that you're really going to have to answer when it comes to analysis. But in this class, a lot of times we simplify things so that we can deal with them mathematically and deal with them from a point of view of analysis. And so you need the stuff in here to do more real-world stuff. So if you get into mechanics, materials, 2 or structures or whatever, you'll definitely be dealing with those ideas. Good question. All right. So moving, and they actually have some interesting pictures here. I was wondering if they did. Let's see. Before I move forward into chapter 6. I don't know. So if you look, for example, in your textbook, this is a little bit different, but they have different loading conditions here. This is on page 386. And they show you what the shear and moment diagram look for these type of loading conditions. Now, in these cases, they're not using reactive loads, so you'll have to, if you had a fixed support here or whatever, you would have to take that into account. But what you can see is if there's no load here, that would, we would have one here, so this V would move up or down based on what was being borne at the reactive load. But the load from this load curve itself just looks like that. So it only occurs where the load is applied. Same with the moment. The moment remains 0 until there's actually some sort of a load. Now, in this case, those are applied loads. You also have to remember that you would have to take into account those reactive loads. But when you don't have a load, when you have a reactive load here and you have nothing out here, everything will go to 0 or stay the same. Yeah. So, and I guess that kind of makes sense if you think about it. If you had a beam with an overhang and you just loaded it between the supports, there's really not a moment or a shear on the... Exactly. It's exactly right. So, but yeah, there you go. All right. Let's go forward into chapter 6. And in chapter 6, we started talking about shear, and we talked about shear based on VQ over IT. So we determined that we were only going to be using I-beams and rectangles. And then later on when I did chapter 16, I also added full circles for our cross sections. So these are the only 3 shapes that we would use, all right? And if we do circles, we really can only do Q's here, which are equal to 0, or here, which is the Q of a semicircle, all right? But we're not going to get into anything funky in terms of shapes. I think I would, for the chapter 6 problem, I think I'll actually stick to an I-beam or a rectangle, and just have it be a pretty straightforward, find the shear based on these problems, on these parameters kind of thing. But you will have to find an I, and you will have to find a Q for a particular shape. And as I'm looking in your textbook, I don't know, 634, that's one we did in homework. I like a couple of these problems, A and B. I like 638. As an example, it's an I-beam, and it's finding shear at 2 different points, okay? So you have to be, so I like that problem. I think that'll be a good example problem for our exam. Now, the next thing we'll do is go into chapter 16, but I'm going to skip into your textbook into chapter 11, which is energy density and loading. I can't remember what the name of the chapter is, but we talk about energy density, we talk about loading conditions, we talk about dynamic loads, and we did it in 3 very short Engineer for Free lectures. So we did not cover this in any particular depth, but it is a concept that you'll need to be familiar with later on. You may have, if you ever talk to people who build like structures out of wood especially, they'll talk about live loads, and they just basically they're talking about loads that are held in place through some dynamic forces. Like roofs are often dynamically loaded or live loaded. And so that's sort of where they're going with this. But the idea of strain energy, we did not get into very much, so the problem will be relatively simple. But we'll have and you'll probably like it if you've studied, because it won't be that difficult. And in 1 and 2, 5, strain energy diagram, modulus, that's just getting some geometry. 6, 7, 8, 9.
So that's one question.
Sure.
I don't know why it popped in my head right now.
Sure, that's good though.
But it's when I was in Barcelona, I
Yeah.
saw a building that just completely confused me.
Yeah.
It just didn't make any sense. It was like it was a modern looking building, a lot of windows,
Yeah.
and it came up structured like this, and then had like this overhang part with no counterpart on the other side, and it went on like
Yeah.
a couple hundred feet. Like this giant block was just hanging out, and it didn't
Wow.
make any sense how that was possible. Now, I've been trying to find it, but I can't seem to look it up.
Do you know?
Yeah, but I mean, there was no like extra support beams holding it, or there wasn't anything touching it. Like it was just out there. What? Is it? Is it ground based? Okay.
Like this? Oops, you can't see what I got. Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That just bothered me so much.
Well,
Like, what?
I do not like, this is referred to as a cantilever, or a cantilevered edge, or a cantilevered floor. And what happens with, and actually in a very small way, our library has a cantilever on the 2nd floor. The old Powell High School building, which has been torn down, was cantilevered. And what really happens with these, what you have to design against is there's a shear plane right here. In other words, it's quite obvious that wants to fall off right here. And what happens if you use very resilient materials, very, I guess that's the best word I can say is resilient, non-brittle materials, these work better, but you have to reinforce it you just have to reinforce it really hard at that cantilevered edge. Yeah. And I don't like them. They make me nervous. And so it was something that they did, not quite to this extent, but back in the 1960s, it became like an architectural fad in the United States. And a lot of buildings had little cantilevered edges. And they don't hold up. You know, they just don't hold up. So
They shouldn't.
How can a building makes you nervous?
I would look at it and I'd just like get the shivers. I'd just be like, ugh, you know.
I feel all the shears in there.
I know, that probably says more about me than it does about the building, right? No, some things just, you know, some things make me nervous. That makes me nervous. The cantilevered edge, when they put the one on the library, because they did that just recently, and I talked to the head of the physical plant, who's a chemical engineer, and he was just like, well, it's going to be fine. We've done the design and stuff. And I'm like, I just don't like looking at it. I don't understand the point. It makes me, I just don't like it. But there are other things, sometimes like, so there's a building up to by the new Powell High School, which used to have a bond rating firm in it called Fitch. I don't know what's in it anymore. But I used to, when I would drive by that building, I would get nervous. And it took me a long time to put it together. But what it was, the parking lot was higher than the building itself. And I just had this feeling that when it rained very hard, especially because everything in Powell, if you go out on 7th Street here, between the Assembly of God Church and the Head Start building up there is this big drain, and all the storm water in Powell runs to that drain. Everything runs up to Alkali Creek. So everything in Powell north of the river runs that way. And so they had that building sitting in the floodplain, with the building being significantly lower in elevation than the parking lot. And I just thought, that's going to flood, you know? And I mean, I didn't even like form that coherent thought, but I would just drive by it and I would just get like a shot of adrenaline just thinking about it. I know. So I looked at it for a while and I realized what it was. And then the first time there was a big rainstorm, it ended up flooding, and they ended up having to put pumps in the parking lot. They just had to divert the water. And it was like, and whenever you pave something or make the surface slick, you always have that problem anyway. That's why green space is very, very important. So speaking of that drainage, if you go north of the Assembly of God Church, there's a there's a condo complex called the Rainwater, which is called the Rainwater because it's in the floodplain for Powell. And north of it, there's a little depression that they play. The kids used to play soccer in. It's a big, nice grassy field. But that's actually a detention pond. That pond was actually designed to catch all the runoff and let it soak in gradually. So that's actually a very good design. But yeah, so cantilevers are just, they work. I get it. I don't like them.
Yeah, that was
so
the one that we saw.
This is the one you saw?
It was so weird because we were walking.
Yeah.
We're next to this building, and then we just get away from it, and we're still covered in the shadow, and the sun's in the other direction.
See?
And we're still walking, and we're like, what is this?
And you're like, how can that be?
Like,
Yeah. I just have a feeling like they'd put something heavy up here and the whole thing would just fall down. I know it doesn't. I mean, they're designed to not do that, but I'm with you on that. I'm not crazy about that kind of a design.
It makes sense.
What's that?
It makes sense.
Which part?
The being nervous.
It's like, do you want to stand under that? You know, yeah. So, but like this is built out of very resilient materials. Now, Powell High School, the building, do you guys ever remember that? Any of you? See, it was a long time ago because I think they closed, I think the last class, I think it was like 2009 or something like that. But it was made out of brick and it had a cantilevered edge. And the whole thing was just this architectural feature, but when it's made out of brick is not resilient, right? So the walls, if you stood on the north side or you drove to the north side and you looked down to the south of that building, you could see the bricks bowing out toward the bottom. I mean, instead of being flat like this, they started like going like that, and I'm like, those things are just going to fall right off, you know? I mean, so inside of the building on the 3rd floor, they had big cracks in the building, you know? So it was bad, but they tore it down for other reasons and built a new high school. So that's, so that's good, but yeah. So anyway, these are the occupational hazards of being an engineer, right? This is what we do. Things like that make us stressful. Anyway, and you guys are a good class. You guys always ask really good questions, so I appreciate that. The last part of our test is going to be on the combined loads handout. And there are 12 problems on that handout, and they are all game. Now, there are 2 different things that I want to be able to do from the handout. One is a Morse circle, and one is a stress block from the Morse circle.
wait,
So,
the stress block to make that for certain.
right. Or the other way around, So, let's see.
That's a thing. I'm surprised.
I know it's here. Where are you? I want that little handout. Okay. Oh, it was way before this. There it is. Took me a while to find it. Okay, so combined loads, chapter 16. Once again, we have to be careful of the geometry, but what I want to do is to take a particular, I don't know, I don't think I want to do that. I think I just want to start with, you know what, we're already doing an a Q and an I, so I'm not going to mess with that. So I'm going to say something like problem 16.8. But what I want you to do is the whole thing. It says determine, okay, principal stresses, maximum shearing stresses, angle of rotation, and that's going to include draw, more circle,
I really don't want to do this again.
the rotated stress block.
Like, you know, thank God you're not going to be an engineer.
There you go. But your drawing is beautiful, Christian. You should just.
Yeah, I did this for 4 years, so it should be beautiful.
So you're quite familiar with it. So just one more, then you're done, right? So okay. So that's kind of what I have in mind.
You could create
What's that?
Beautiful drawing.
See? So I think you showed me some on your phone. You showed me some of your stuff. It's very impressive. So just one more. We'll do that. So.
You're actually going to judge on beauty because I'll do a challenge on that.
You what? I can't hear you.
I'll do a challenge on that.
Oh.
Draw on beauty.
Are you gonna do? All right. Well, whoever does the most beautiful drawing, right? So. The other thing I wanted to say was, as you know, your final exam is worth 40% of your grade, as was your midterm. So they're worth 80%. Your homework is worth 20%, or 15. Your attendance is worth 5. But everybody gets 100 on their attendance in this class. I mean, it's not like you had to, even if you missed a couple of days, everybody will get 100. So that will boost your grade. The other thing is, those of you that went, there were 2 extra credit opportunities. And you get extra credit, right? One was the open house at the observatory, yes, and the other was if you came over to listen to VacuTech when they were talking about jobs available in Sheridan. So it's an impressive company. I mean, I don't know that it's like everybody that gets out of college thinks, I want to build vacuum cleaners for a car wash, you know, but I mean, it's really kind of cool. I mean, it's pretty impressive stuff. So anyway, so that's what we have for the class, and that's what we have for the final. Do you guys have any questions for me?
You like to give us the answer key?
Yes, but I will not. But it was a nice try.
Absolutely can, but I'm not gonna.
That's right, exactly. So, I was going to come over here and look at my. Yes,
But we are allowed to take a sheet.
absolutely.
So we're going to focus on that.
Yes, put together a good study sheet, and that will be much better. Let's take a look here. Our final exam is scheduled for 3:30 till 5:30 on Wednesday the 12th, which is in 2 days. So if anybody wants to take the exam before that time, or if you want to take that exam after that time on Thursday, let me know and I'll make an appointment with you. Can't do it on Friday because I want to be grading on Friday. So unless something, I mean, obviously if something, egregious occurred, I would work with you, but I would prefer not to figure Friday into our getting our final done day. Okay. So.
Can I take mine on Thursday?
Yes.
I already know I want to.
What time would you like to? I'm free all day.
How about 1?
Yep, you betcha. Let's see, right here. All right. Anyone else?
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, I should.
I have to figure it out before.
You let me know. Sure, absolutely. And just let me know. Anytime, if you give me, let's see, you could take it anytime Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, really, as long as you let me know a couple hours ahead of time so that I can be ready, okay? So And Eddie, how about you?
Yeah, I'll do it Thursday.
Thursday? Okay, at 1 o'clock? Okay. 1 o'clock till 3 o'clock. So come to my office, all right? And there is a slight chance, and I do mean slight, that I'll be late because I have, but I'll leave the tests if Mrs. Craig goes there. I'm not even sure if she's there on Thursday or not. But the reason I could possibly be late was because I would be in my business math final. And I have not had anybody, I've had half of the students take that, and nobody's taken more than an hour, so, yes.
You wanted to put Townsend on it.
Sorry?
You could put Townsend on it.
On what, on giving my final?
Yeah.
Oh, I could do that. Yeah, I just think I'll
Doesn't
be
do
there.
anything, I know that.
I just think I'll be there, but if I'm not, just please understand I'm not like having a long lunch, which sounds really nice, but it won't be that, so I'll be on my way, all right? And if it seems like, I mean, like if I have a business math student, because my business math is over in Fagerberg, and if somebody is just not ready to wrap it up at 1, I will walk them over, and they will just finish it over at my office. So I won't be very late if I am late at all. Okay?
Is that where you want us to go, is to your office?
Please, and I'll set you up in the conference room so that you can have a little privacy. So, all right. And then you just let me know. And anytime, like I said, our final is scheduled. If I don't hear from anybody, or I will expect you at 3:30 on Wednesday the 12th. But there's no reason that has to be. I'm free the 11th, Tuesday. The only time I'm not, okay. So I need a little bit of time in the morning because we have a division meeting, so I have to prepare for that. So I would say I'm not free. You want to take it there? I'm not free from 11 to 1 because I gotta sound like I know what I'm talking about for my meeting. How does that sound? All right, but any other time. So just send me an email and we'll go from there. All right? All right. So do you guys have any other questions for me? All right. Well, you guys it's been really fun to get to know you all. You're a great class. And I'll post this as well. I'll change the problems and post this up for the review for the final exam. So we'll be good to go. All right. All right. Well, please let me know if you have any questions. And I get to see some of you in the spring. I know. I'm not sure everybody, but I don't think we have any classes together. But there you go. Well, you've been a trooper. I know. I mean, seriously, you've been a trooper. So I appreciate that. And then I think, Emma, do I have a class with you? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so. I have thermo and fluids. Well, Emma's already had thermo, so.
But it's online.
Thermo's online, yes. It's actually in thermo. I will be here most of the time, but all of the lectures will be online. So
Is there a midterm and final?
yes, same structure.
So should I watch all the videos, try to do all the homework, right
Yes.
at the beginning when it's easy, and then
Yes.
and then be like, yeah, I'm successful.
Yes.
Get it all by the final.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
You'd be
And
surprised what I would.
Eddie, are you in thermo? Not sure. You're not? Okay, so. All right, well, if you have any trouble, come see me. So otherwise, we'll call that a day, and I'll rewrite the review for the final with the problems on it that I gave today, post it up, and we'll see you either Thursday or whenever you let me know. All right? All right, you guys have a great day.